Hey, tourpreneurs, it's Mitch Bach, and just a quick note before we begin today's episode. Tourpreneur is currently sponsored by Google. We're thankful for their support of our community, and we are offering with them a completely free course helping you unlock the power and potential of Google's Things to Do program, which is specifically helping tour operators add their tours to Google in new ways that gives you new exposure and more direct bookings. To learn more, go to tourpreneur.com/Google. And as always, show notes, more resources, links to our newsletter, our business coaching community, and so much more are available on tourpreneur.com. Now to the episode. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Tourpreneur podcast. I am Mitch Bach, and I could not be more excited about my guest today, Dacher Keltner. He is a psychologist who works at the University of California, Berkeley. And I have a dear friend who's a psychologist here in New York. And I told him how excited I was that I was meeting him. And he goes, "Oh, yeah, the emotion guy. He had your emotion textbook in college." And so, Dacher, just as a way of getting started in our conversation today, I was wondering if you could tell us how you came to become the guy that my friend recognized as the emotion guy.
Yeah, well, I grew up in a very emotional household in a very emotional time. I was raised by, I now understand, people who hewed to the philosophy of romanticism. You know, trust your feelings and your intuitions and your passions. My mom taught romanticism at a public university, and my dad was a painter and loved Goya and Francis Bacon and all the passionate painters. And I grew up in the late 60s, you know, in a hotspot of the cultural revolutions, Laurel Canyon, LA. So I just felt like, God, all of the world, everything we care about is about emotion. You know, the politics we care about, our identities, the art, etc. And but I had kind of a scientific tendency, which runs in my family, my mom's family. And when I got to grad school, you know, it was kind of the heyday of the cognitive revolution in the 80s. You know, Danny Kahneman and Amos Tversky and others, and there was no discussion of emotion. And so scientifically, the real turning point for me, Mitch, was I went to a talk by Paul Ekman, who had figured out how to measure facial expression, and I was blown off the map. You know, it's just like, I can't believe there are objective measures of emotion in the face and in the voice and in the body. And so I dove into that scientific literature for the past 35 years.
Interesting. There's a couple of names there that are actually really resonant with me and my work in travel designing. And I'm interested to kind of dive into them. First of all, one is Paul Ekman. And I talk about him sometimes in the terms of the most core or deepest human emotions that are universal, that we all sort of share. And one of those is the emotion of surprise. And it always surprises me to think of that actually hidden within who we are as humans are these built-in ways to unlock real easy moments of delight just by tapping into those.
Wonderful. Yeah. And, you know, so over the course of my career, what I've done, Mitch, is use new methodologies, new measures of the face, the voice, touch, new statistical approaches to kind of expand Ekman's paradigm of 6 basic emotions. Now we know there are about 20. And you're right, you know, surprise. And then I do a lot of work on awe, which is close to surprise. Surprise is this delightful emotion, and it's paradoxical because it can be both really delightful and pleasurable, and it can also be scary and, you know, and anger producing. So it has this very interesting quality of we don't know what direction it'll go, but what we do know is surprise. Just, it's like this, you know, jumpstart switch to your brain. It's like, wow, I got to rethink things. And so I'm glad you're cultivating surprise in the work that you do. We need more of it.
Yeah, well, that connects with the other name that sparked something in me, which was Daniel Kahneman. And thinking about the peak end rule. You know, our community are travel designers, and one of the sad facts of our travel community is you might have created an 8-day tour that goes to all of these incredible places, but the traveler ends up remembering a peak moment.
Yeah.
They remember how they feel over time and might remember a single or a couple of moments from that trip.
Yeah, Danny Kahneman, Nobel Prize winner, longtime collaborator with Amos Tversky. Danny was at Berkeley, Amos was at Stanford. I TA'd for Amos, and it was an honor to see his mind at work. Just thinking about what they call these heuristics and very intuitive principles that govern consciousness in some sense. And Danny's work on Peak End is so fascinating that, how we represent experiences. If you spend time in prison or you're out on a first date or you do a trip or you're teaching a class, it's like you look for those peak moments and the ending matters, and what a interesting, the deep idea that he was so gifted at revealing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's an exciting idea, and yet it's a terrifying idea because it means that what you might do as crafting travel is not simply about plugging in the pieces and making sure
Not at all.
in budget. It's about emotion. It's about your life's work.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think everybody who's listening is like, I was really excited. I was going to see my daughter in Barcelona, and I had my wallet pickpocketed. And that defined the trip. It was like this peak moment, and so we got to watch out for those peaks.
Yeah, good or bad. You're absolutely right. So your current work has really coalesced around this word awe, which is kind of an incredible word because I think we all recognize it, and yet it'd be maybe hard for us to put our finger on exactly what it is. And so I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about this word and how you arrived at this being so important for us as humans.
Oh man, I remember, Mitch, when I was joining Paul Ekman's lab, and I was 27 and just getting my PhD, and here's like this icon of the field, and I was at his house, and we were looking out at San Francisco. I was like, what should I study? And he said, you should study awe. And I was like, man, there's a science that could study awe. I mean, that it almost brings tears now. And that's what we've been doing for 15 years. And that's what the book's about. It's like awe, defining the concept is an emotion. And you're right to frame this in terms of emotion. We feel when we encounter really vast things, most typically, that are beyond our frame of reference or our mysteries. And you go, wow, what is this ritual that I'm observing in Japan around a death, right? And it seems vast, the whole community's involved, et cetera. And then, to further, we can go in many directions to really, bring richness to that definition. You could think about the body, right? With awe, we tear up, we get goosebumps, which are fascinating. You get this warmth in your chest. With awe, it shifts your sense of consciousness, right? You feel humble and open to the world. You feel small, and like the world is so much bigger than what you ordinarily care about. So what an incredible emotion to bring to our awareness.
I'm wondering, in your travels, I know you've been in the Himalayas recently and elsewhere. Are there moments of awe that come to mind that were sort of unlocked through a travel moment rather than just being at home?
Oh my God, it's the fundamental reason in some sense we travel, right? Humans, unlike a lot of species, are voyagers. We're wanderers. There are genes that are related to wandering. It's just part of our signature strength is to do that. And, I was lucky. I had these unconventional parents. And so, we did, in one early awe was this incredible, we hopped into our VW bus, 1968, and those weren't very good cars back then. They tended to break down in the desert. And we just drove straight into the Rockies from LA. And just like, my brother and I were like, wow, the awe of thunderstorms and mountains and a drunk guy who caught this giant trout, and the rivers and rafting, it was just free form awe. I've had more, every year, I go backpacking with my daughter, Natalie, and it's just full on awe, and we gripe at each other. We get mad at each other. We fight, but there are moments of awe that are just, I remember one in particular that I still, it changed my whole philosophy of life, where, forgive me for going on a bit, but I was in Bhutan with a dear friend, 2008. We were visiting these large snow cranes in this glacial valley, and the people there, the Bhutanese, said, they will fly to Siberia, and before they do, they fly over this temple that you're going to visit around the prayer pole 3 times and then fly to Siberia. And as a Western skeptical scientist, I was like, oh, that's so sweet, that you would think that. And so my friend and I are at this temple. All the monks start like chanting and getting excited and moving around and bringing their instruments into the prayer room. And we start to hear these cranes barking or calling. And lo and behold, they flew around the prayer pole 3 times and went to Siberia, and we were in this chanting, and it was this, I was like, wow, look at what the Western mind misses that travel opens us up to. So almost every trip, Mitch, is life-changing for the reason of awe.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny to me. This goes back to our discussion of surprise, which is that a lot of these are moments that can't be concocted and may never be repeated again, and those are the ones that are often the most cherished. As a leader of a community of travel creators, I think we're more interested in the side. Of course, we're interested in that, but we're also interested in the side of figuring out what is at play in these, and can we create these? Can we build these into the way that we're designing a travel experience?
Yeah, and thank you for asking that question. In writing this book, Awe, and it's been a moment, of like, wow, a lot of people are thinking like, that's what my work is about. I work at a museum, or I teach in prisons, or I'm a medical doctor dealing with palliative care. And it's like, there's so much awe in so much of our life and our work. And one of the questions that people have gotten to that I've started to really actively engage in audiences with, be it mayors of cities or, people who run museums, Carnegie Hall, is like, how do you design awe into a realm? And there are clear ways to do it. We have a whole program now to design awe into classrooms that we're launching this month at the Greater Good Science Center. And it is pause, clear your mind, don't rely on quick labels, take some deep breaths, and then some simple perceptual or almost, challenges. Like, think about the origins of what you're experiencing. Think about the big thing that you're relating to right now. Wow, I'm in the Alhambra and I'm looking at these incredible mosaics. What does it mean to you? Where does that come from, right? Relate to vast things. Our relation to vastness is big. One of the themes that emerges in awe that's really important is to think about systems, right? Awe in some fundamental sense is about the systems that you become aware of. When I had that experience in Bhutan, I suddenly realized like, these people have a philosophy of life where they understand migratory patterns and music that comes together, those systems. So there's a lot we can do to design awe into our work.
I think for starters, you had mentioned sometimes we get kind of a Western Cartesian desire to think our heads need to be the answer to everything.
Exactly.
I need to say the right thing. I need to get I'll tell the right bit of information, and then I can create awe. But what you would describe at the Alhambra was just creating the conditions of a bodily presence.
And I can't tell you how powerful it is just to pause, be quiet. If words come in, oh, what century is this? We're all doing that all the time. Like, push those to the side, take a breath, and like start to sense what's vast around you and connect it to the self, to your body, and if you just do that, we just published a paper, Mitch, I'm really proud of. Medical doctors, nurses during the pandemic in hospitals, people dying. And that's what they did for 1 minute a day. Pause, breathe, quiet, and think about the big thing that you're part of in that moment. And then boom, it benefited them in terms of their well-being, anxiety, and depression. So it's designed it with the body in mind.
Yeah, it reminds me of the way that you start your book, Awe. with kind of a description of the default self, the self that we sort of carry around with us every day. And it almost seems like some of our job as a travel designer needs to be about figuring out how do we snap people out of that the default self.
Yeah, this awe, when people feel awe, like in the spiritual writing of the last 700 or 800 years, people would say, like, I am nothing, I dissolve. In the psychedelic literature, ego death. In the religious literature, it's, I'm really part of a divine force. There's no me here. And we've documented that empirically, even down to the brain, where it's the default mode network, which is all the voice of your ego quiets down during awe. And subjectively or phenomenologically, what it is it's this voice you hear. I have a loud one. I'll bet you do too. Like, okay, what are you doing right now? What's your goal? What's your schedule like? What are your priorities today? What do people think of you? What's your reputation? That's all really important, but it keeps us away from the sublime. It's the antithesis. And thankfully, experiences of awe kind of quiet that all down. They make you suddenly aware of, like, my God, the light on this river in Burma, another awe experience for me, near these Buddhist temples, that's almost divine, right? So part of our challenge in any place is to not be overrun by the default self.
Well, and let me translate that into practical terms for our audience. My community, they want to run fantastic businesses. Of course, they want to transform people. And part of that means they want great reviews. They want happy customers at the end. And it almost seems to me like you're mentioning, you're speaking right now that we need to calm down that part of the traveler's brain that is like just judging. It's almost too aware of not the moment, but of themselves judging the moment. Oh, this tour guide's going on for too long. Oh, these streets are dirty. Whereas the transcending of that, the awe, like injecting awe into that is essentially quieting that part down and giving them a moment of feeling like they're part of an incredible group. They're in a fantastic moment. They'll never have this again and cherish it.
One of the really humbling things about this work, and sometimes it's misconstrued, is like, you don't want to turn a trip or your work or your time with your friends or family into awe all the time, right? That'd be a hippie commune, which didn't function that well. What you want are moments of awe. You want to just pause and look for it, and then carry on with your structured day. And absolutely, you think of the default self, it's almost like a checklist. It's always like, okay, check that off, check that off, check that off. Oh, I saw that painting or went to this museum. But we also need to open up to mystery and unfettered experience. And like, wow, when my dad, I write about this in the book because he was a painter, Richard Keltner, he is a painter. He took me to the Louvre, and my brother and I were sprinting around doing the like teenage thing. And he said, hold on, guys. We were in the room of the Dutch masters. He's like, just stand and just look at these guys and see what they're doing, and suddenly it was like, oh my God, so just pause, give yourself 5 minutes of awe.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole movement now called slow looking.
Is there really?
Yes, absolutely.
Tell me where I can find that. That's amazing.
I'm blanking on their name right now, but there's a Harvard art history professor who begins their intro to art history class by requiring that their students go out to the art gallery and spend 3 hours looking at a single work of art. And what happens is they start obviously just judging, criticizing the activity themselves, getting bored. They cycle through all of this stuff, and about 30 minutes in, and then it just keeps increasing until a moment where they're seeing things they just didn't see because they didn't spend that time entering into it in the same way.
One of the, how do we design awe, connect to vastness, think about systems, slow looking, slow observation. Mm-hmm. When part of the book is about my grief in losing my younger brother, Rolf, who he was my companion in awe through life. We had this incredible brotherhood 1 year apart. And part of our childhood was traveling and wandering through nature. I grew up after Laurel Canyon in the foothills of the Sierras. And afterwards, it was all slow looking. It's just like looking at the sky, looking at bodies of water, for 30 minutes. And what a reminder in travel and in life, right? Just to slow it down and look.
It reminds me of not exactly a colleague, but someone who spent a fair amount of time out in San Francisco and Berkeley, Allen Ginsberg, the beat poet, who said you own twice as much rug if you're twice as aware of the rug. And that there's this rush, like you said, for checklists, for more, but and also for experienced creators, right? We add one more bullet point to the itinerary and we can sell it for more because it's a better trip now that we're in one more city, one more thing.
And I think it's it's ultimately, for me, a scientist, an empirical question, like, would slow travel be better, cover fewer things? And you probably have a lot of opinions, but the great thing about this conversation and the concepts that science allied to it is we can do it quickly, right? We can do it within 5 minutes. You can slow look and have a great experience.
Absolutely. You've made several references now to Buddhism and to religion. And it's absolutely true that religion's had a lot of time to perfect awe.
Yes,
a lot of trial and error over the years. And you can kind of leave, dogma aside and just look at the practices. And I'm wondering if you could tell me sort of, what does religion get right about the creation of senses of awe?
Oh, man. It's so interesting. And I thought so hard about that question writing this book, which is I was raised without religion. I'm not even sure, about 80% of Americans are spiritual. They really believe in some force that animates experience, that transcends rational understanding. I kind of think I am, after some experiences in grieving my brother's loss. But, digging it, mystical awe is William James, it's Emerson, it's the Bhagavad Gita, it's Buddhism, it's everywhere. Christianity, Julian of Norwich, great spiritualist in the 14th century. And I humbly, and now I teach this, Mitch, to my Berkeley students who are skeptical, hard-nosed, moving away from religion. That generation is really moving away from religion. And I say, religion gets a lot right. They get music right. They get chanting right. They get iconography right. They get slow looking right. They get being physically present with others. They get ritual right. They get us. And I love the idea of the sacred. I can go into Saint-Germain-des-Prés. I was a college student for a little while in Paris. My mom lived there. Man, I get into that cathedral. If there's music and the light and the color, it's spiritual. So they get a lot right. And I think Alain de Botton was really right, which is we need religion for atheists, right? People like Casper ter Kuile in How We Gather, same thing. He went to Harvard Divinity School. Like, man, this is one of the great human institutions. They have music, right? So let's take that and let's make it part of our day, and we'll derive the benefits of it. So I think we should be asking that question. How would you do it with travel? Can travel be a spiritual experience, or should it be?
Well, it's so funny. I grew up extremely Catholic and moved away from it. And what's funny now is that I find myself returning more and more every day to the concepts that Catholicism got right. The concepts of liturgy, right? Of the idea that of the sacred and the profane, that when you enter a space, you mark it with time. And I think of some of the profound walking tours, ghost tours that I've taken.
Wow.
And it was marked by a guide who sounded a bell and told us now we are in the 18th century.
Wow.
And just that intonation, that physical resonance, that embodied resonance, and then just a signal that we're somewhere different now. Religion, that's what every church does. That's what every sacred space does. A sense of the communal, of resonating in synchronicity with a group of people. And to me, this is one of the most powerful opportunities that group travel creators have. You might be leading a food tour of 10 people or a bus tour for 25 days across Europe. You have a group around you.
Yeah.
What is the power of a group in terms of crafting awe or these transcendent moments?
It's profound. And in the book, I write about what we call the 8 wonders that produce awe.
Yeah.
And that came out of a study of 26 different countries. We gathered stories of awe, derived this taxonomy or classification. And we've already been talking about, paintings and nature and religion being 3 that we've talked about. And one of them is collective shared movement, what Emile Durkheim, this French sociologist, called collective effervescence, which is...
Love that phrase.
Same here. Man, once you start moving with other people and vocalizing with others, and then you're sharing attention, right? And then suddenly you are thinking about symbolic things, you are very open to awe. And it's the wonderful thing about it in contemporary terms, Mitch, is like, you find it everywhere. You can find it at a sporting event, at a musical venue, in dancing, I love big Zócalos in Mexico and plazas in Europe because they're collective, right? They're shared movement, and they have no religion to them. And suddenly you're like, I feel transcendent in this space. And so you can do a lot with collective groups, like you say, and I hope you guys are.
Yeah, you're right. I mean, singing, chanting, just some of those ways in which you feel just very quickly larger than yourself, more vocal than your singular voice.
Even Durkheim was really interesting in that. And I did this, I just taught this retreat at Esalen, and we did a couple of these versions where even just standing together and all looking at the same thing intentionally, right? Where suddenly you sync up, your awareness in your bodies and what you're looking at and consciousness. And what we know from the science is just doing that, collective intentional appreciation, your neurophysiologies are synchronizing, you feel a sense of common cause and goodness, and it's powerful to build that into a travel experience.
We're all attuned, not facing each other even in ourselves,
exactly.
but
exactly.
the vastness, the unknown.
Exactly.
That reminds me, I mean, I've had 20 years leading groups, all stripes around the world. And I go back to sometimes the moments of awe for me that I was kind of reflecting on before this, where they were quite simple. I got out of the bus with a group of 30 people. It just rained. There was a full rainbow and there was a giant field, and I got out my little speaker and it played Somewhere Over the Rainbow, and we all got silently out of the bus and just stared at that rainbow and listened to that nostalgic song, which probably resonated with our own singular pasts, but together we were all looking out at that rainbow and didn't say a word, and they all marked that it was the best part of a 10-day experience.
I just got goosebumps. That's amazing. That's it. Yeah. And so easy, right? And so human.
So easy.
That's what we're meant to do.
Yeah, is it fair to say that actually your question should be, what can I do to be the most human in this moment, or the most fully human in this moment, and bring that out in my guests?
Yeah, and that was Einstein on awe. He said, this is the fundamental human emotion, is our love of mystery and pondering the vastness of experience. And so many, it's interesting, Mitch, just to, I've talked about awe to tens of thousands of people, and a lot, when I ask people, like, tell me a story of awe, a lot of it is travel, is being somewhere different. And how great to think about this together.
You bring up the story of the loss of your brother, which you cover in your book. It connects with one of the kind of wonders of life, as you call it, storytelling.
Yeah.
Like what kinds of stories are unlocking this sense? Because it's not every story. And
I think the definition of awe gets us, you could think about the content of the story, which it's likely to be about, a spirit or a person of moral beauty, which we haven't talked about, who, I visited Gandhi's ashram, and just when you're steeped in Gandhi, you're prone to awe, or a natural event. But then I think that the structure of the story, no matter what the content is back to, the vastness and mystery. That awe-inspiring stories, ultimately awe is about mystery. It's like you you have the experience, you gain new insight, but then you don't you're curious about more. Darwin, when he writes his theory of evolution, one of the biggest ideas a human has had, it just opened up further mysteries. When I saw that experience in Bhutan, I had another awe experience in India on a trip where I felt my brother's voice in the sky. I was having this awe experience that catapulted me to more inquiry, right? And the urge to explore. So I think the stories of awe have to be about vast wonders, but they really structurally have to have some mystery in it. They have to prompt the reader to be like, wow, I got to be thinking more about this, or I got to go feel it.
Well, yeah, you're absolutely right. Mystery, and it doesn't need to always be mystery with a capital M.
No.
It can be just simply making sure that your traveler sometimes feels like they don't know what's next. So
exactly.
they're on a journey.
Exactly.
Even if it's just down a couple of streets in New York City or wherever.
Yeah, and back to surprise. Just a little bit of surprise awaits them.
Well, and that's the that's what I was mentioning when I was talking about how the world's become increasingly religious to me, or enchanted. It's because what is a revelation but a surprise, right? It doesn't need to be an angel descending and delivering me, golden tablets. It's just the revelation of these moments of either collective effervescence or the surprise of moral beauty. I think of I saw on TikTok the other day, just it popped up this story of this teenage girl who she had noticed a student sitting alone at school at lunch, and so she created a club basically where nobody would sit alone again, and it was just a club of fellow students who would notice around the lunchroom or around school anybody that looked kind of alone, and they'd go up and they'd befriend them and ask them about themselves and try to
incredible.
Them. Yeah. It created this network effect of just generosity. And
wow.
What's going on? It speaks to what you said, moral beauty, the surprise of
Yeah, no, I mean, exactly. And what a spectacular example, Mitch, because moral beauty is when we're moved to awe. So worldwide, it's the most common source of awe, even though you wouldn't have anticipated that. And it's when you're moved to tears and goosebumps and chills and awe by someone's kindness or courage or overcoming obstacles, and sometimes excellence, like, the incredible sprinter in the Olympics. And, your example is exactly the power of the story of moral beauty. It's like she sees something, she feels moved, she does it, and then in acting of it and sharing, suddenly other people are inspired, and off you go, man. You have social movements. There's new thinking about the really important social moral movements of our times, that it begins like the Vietnamese monk who set himself on fire because the horrors of Vietnam were too profound for him to bear. And suddenly everybody was like, for me too, we can't be doing this. So it's your example is a spectacular testimony to how we need to tell these stories of moral beauty. And traveling is full of them, right?
Yeah.
When you go to places, you're like, wow, my visiting Gandhi's ashram, so obvious, like I'm holding sand that he may have meditated on. It's incredible.
Yeah. When I teach storytelling to tour guides, the first distinction I make is between delivering information and delivering emotion. And you're going to open your mouth no matter what, but there's a real question to, well, what are you doing with the words that you're using? Or, I mean, as a psychologist, you're probably much more deeply aware of the forgetting curve and the way that, we're basically designed to forget almost everything. And we forget most of what a tour guide's going to tell us about the information about a site. But those moments of storytelling that are focused on asking yourself what kind of emotion can inspire, my group of travelers to go and be changed and to change the world.
Yeah.
That changes what you think you're doing.
And I'll tell you, I do this now all the time, Mitch, and your audience, I think, would really love to do this. Is I really learned this actually, and it's revealing for travel. During the pandemic, I did a lot of work with medical doctors, nurses, because it was chaos. 30% understaffed, 1 million people died, COVID, vaccines, horrible time. And I just would start when I'd work with 50 doctors, I'd be like, let's share stories of moral beauty, you know?
Mm.
And they'd be like, what are you talking about? Oh, man, this is all about death. Wait a minute. There was this patient who got to see their grandchild and hugged me and said life is incredible. It's everywhere, you know? And so it's a great frame, a great prompt for a storytelling to really drill into what is that peak of travel that we're looking for.
Yeah, I love that so much. It speaks also to the idea that collective effervescence, that sort of buzzing and humming together, can also come from a sense of our shared humanity, perhaps through either moral excellence, but also through just expressing vulnerability, right?
Yeah.
I know the minute you spoke about the loss of your brother, probably sympathetically, thousands of listeners had a moment of thinking about loss in their lives.
Yeah, one of the, deep truths that I've always been guided by from Buddhism is that first noble truth that there's just vulnerability and suffering in life. It's one of the fundamental laws of living forms is, growth and decay and death, birth, growth, decay, and death. And that's law-like. And out of that, we all have experiences of loss, and like I did losing my brother Rolf. And by the way, I found enormous awe and a reframing of my view of life and death traveling. I hiked Mont Blanc and hiked in the Sierras where my brother and I went to India, etc. But the deeper philosophical point is just really humans, when we suffer and when we are facing uncertainties or traumas in our past, or we lose loved ones or get a disease ourselves, we find wonder in it and we find awe. And a lot of it's horrifying and painful, not to be denied, but routinely humans look for awe to understand. The near-death experience literature that I review in the book, the mind, when it's about to cease, feels awe, right? It's like, what is this? And what is life? And I think a lot of our really peak experiences in travel, you think about eat, pray, love, or, is like, I'm going to go do this out of suffering and learn how to be a more enriched person, and voyaging and travel get us to it. And I think awe is a magic ingredient of that.
It goes back to those religious terms like death and resurrection, that sense of rebirth that requires that darkness. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. So, probably on the thoughts of many in our community today is kind of the looming threats and opportunities around what technology is doing to change how a travel experience happens. And I think of things like AI tour guides with words in our ears. I think of self-driving vehicles, the endless ways in which this kind of mechanization of experience is removing a lot of what was the purview of the human. And
I agree.
Just wondering where can that stop? Like what on a psychological level does being with other humans do? Like, where's the moat? What can't technology do?
Oh my God. And it's so important you raise it because, the people I would really worry about is the next generation, right? The 15-year-olds right now who, they like AI, and AI is going to do a lot of good, is doing a lot of good in the world here.
Yeah, we're not demonizing it.
Yeah. But you asked the fundamental question, and I'll tell you, I've done a lot of consulting, Facebook 2010 to 2014, Google Assistants, I've done a lot of work on that, and come to the conclusion, like, there are fundamental things that tech will never be able to do. It will never be able to really touch your skin in an embrace. It will never be able to produce a smell in a place, right? It will never be able to create what you and I just talked about with collective effervescence. Like, wow, I'm with all these humans and my mind sees these physical bodies and has a sense of group or we, it will, and then you could get more philosophical at the meta level. There's a lot where children have this very deep intuition of the real and the simulated or fake. It's just a fundamental notion. And so tech is simulated, and it just can't do, when you have an incredible experience in traveling and you hug someone and you're crying, that's human, so, I think, I would make that argument forcefully that there's something fundamental about experience that needs other humans to be creating it for us and with us, and we for them, and it's irreplaceable, so, I don't know if that will be a argument to be made empirically, but I think ethically, I think and the writer's strike in Hollywood did that. We got to have people writing stories.
1,000%. I mean, you stole the words out of my mouth. There's like a moral imperative there. It's not simply we need to be as prescriptive as descriptive about what this is.
Yeah,
and say this is what we value about being alive.
Yeah, it is. And and you think about, and I think that ultimately is the one of the criteria you could work with, which is like, does your experience come from something that's alive and that reproduces or has the opportunity, and AI generated avatar that guides your travel experience isn't, and I don't think it's not in the same category.
When you look at a movie like Her from back in the day, where you have a lonely man who falls in love with a voice, is that getting close to overcoming that kind of simulacrum kind of barrier, or
it's everywhere? There's AI generate, this music art. There are AI sex dolls, and it's just like it's we get very close, but I think you're right, Mitch, and I think it's like we have to make the moral categorical claim that this has to be a human. A teacher has to be a human, a travel guide has to be a human, a professional athlete has to be a human, and a doctor has to, for the most part, be a human. And so I think it's, I could design the science that would tell you that all of those cases, things go better with the human as opposed to the AI generated entity. And we got to make that case.
Seems like there's built into that a design imperative for my travel community to make sure that they're designing the most human experiences possible, that they're not just delivering information. It's not rote, that they need to design the irreplaceable.
Yeah, absolutely. Well put.
Dacher, is there, out of the thousands of responses that you received during your study, and probably since the publication of your book, Awe, is there a favorite moment of awe that comes to your mind that you received?
Wow. One category, and I get emails on a daily basis. The death thing is real. I found awe watching my brother pass away. I lost it in grief, and I found it again in thinking about life. And, I remember in particular somebody writing me about the loss of his sister. I lost a brother, and he was like, this transformed grief, which is one of the big events of life that is hard to do. And then I was really inspired by a woman in Colorado. I write about some of the work I did in prisons, where I found a lot of humanity and awe. And she's like, it's everywhere. It's like the growth of humanity out of redemption. And she's teaching it now, in prison. So that was really gratifying. Finding awe in the Metropolitan Museum of Art, that's great, but there's a lot of
but in the
resources for that.
Detention center, different, yeah.
Yeah, but finding it in the places that you wouldn't ordinarily cultivate it really meant a lot to me. So thanks for asking that question.
Dr. Keltner, thank you so much for taking the time to share your research and your insights and your phenomenal book with our community.
Thank you, Mitch. And thank you for this conversation. It's personally, it's made me think a lot about all that I've found in travel, which is so much of my life. So.
Same. It's so funny. Just even the power of conversation to unlock within each other is unlimited. I mean, just in your last moment of talking about death, I thought about a moment as a guide when I was leading a tour group at the Citadel Chapel in Charleston, South Carolina, and there was an open piano, and it's a group of elderly ladies that I was guiding, and I sat down at the piano just because I know how to play piano, and I played Amazing Grace, and everybody started singing, and one woman in particular just broke uncontrollably down in tears, and it's an emotional song, especially for that generation. But at the end, she shared the story that just before the trip, her mother had died, and that it had been a long, agonizing cancer. And her mother, during her final days, said, "Most importantly, I want you to go on that trip. I don't care what. I don't want you to be at home grieving. I want you to go on that trip." And she said, I want to see the world through your eyes. I want you to see the world for me." And the woman shared that that song was the last song played at her funeral. It was the song she played as she said goodbye to her mother. And we were just a puddle of absolute tears. Just that storytelling, that collective ritual, that sense of moment of heightened emotion, that it feels like it captured everything that you're speaking of. And what, and I never felt more alive than that kind of moment.
And how human it is, and how available it is, right? If we just think about this moment. So
how available. What a perfect way to end this. And thank you again.
Thank you, Mitch. It's been really fun.